Ethan stirred awake, his groggy mind processing the strange warmth on the other side of his bed. He frowned, cracking one eye open to see what could only be described as a surreal Christmas morning hallucination. Curled up beside him, a tiny figure with shimmering silver hair and a delicate set of pointed ears dozed peacefully, her petite frame swaddled in what looked like miniature armor adorned with glowing runes. "What the?" he muttered, jolting upright. The motion startled the stranger, who shot up like a startled squirrel, clutching a tiny glowing sword. "Stay your hand, mortal," she declared, her voice both commanding and oddly melodic. She blinked rapidly, her gaze darting around the room. "Have I been captured in your chambers?" Ethan gawked at her, his mind racing between disbelief and panic. "What are you doing in my bed? And what, are you?" "I am Lisha, a warrior of the Frostbound Court," she replied, straightening her tiny shoulders with an air of exaggerated dignity. "I was sent to protect the sacred hearth and its guardian." She waved the glowing sword in his general direction, but its size made the gesture more adorable than intimidating. "You? Me? Sacred hearth? Lady, this is my grandpa's old cabin, not some medieval role-playing game." Ethan ran a hand through his messy hair, trying to shake off the absurdity of the situation. "Did someone put you up to this? Is this some kind of prank?" Lisha narrowed her eyes. "You mock my sacred duty. The hearth's flame must not extinguish, lest the veil between realms falter. Surely, even mortals grasp the importance of such a task." Ethan glanced at the fireplace across the room, its embers faintly glowing. "You mean, the fireplace? That's what this is about?" "Precisely," she exclaimed, hopping off the bed and landing with a soft thud. She marched toward the fireplace, her tiny boots clicking against the wooden floor. "It is my sworn duty to tend to your fire before it goes out." Ethan snorted, a bemused grin tugging at his lips. "Yeah, okay. Be my guest." She knelt before the fireplace with reverence, sprinkling glittering powder from a pouch at her waist onto the embers. The flames roared to life, startling Ethan. "Impressive, and totally unnecessary," he muttered. "So, you're, what, an elf? Fairy? Cosplayer who takes things way too seriously." "I am an elf warrior of the Frostbound Court," she corrected, puffing out her chest. "And you are Ethan, guardian of this sacred ground." I'm Ethan, guy who inherited a dusty cabin and wanted a quiet Christmas." He gestured toward the bed. "And that doesn't explain why you were sleeping in my bed." Lisha tilted her head, her silvery brows furrowing. "I arrived late in the night, weary from my journey across realms. I assumed the guardian of the hearth would welcome me to his sanctuary." "Right. Welcome would have been easier if you hadn't just invaded my personal space." Her gaze flickered toward the bed, and a faint blush dusted her cheeks. "You mortals have peculiar notions of hospitality." Ethan crossed his arms, trying to maintain some semblance of authority. "Look, Lisha, or whatever your name is, this is a misunderstanding. You're clearly not from around here, but you can't just barge into someone's house and—" "Enough," she interrupted, holding up her tiny hand. "The hearth requires vigilance. Mortal customs are secondary to my mission." Ethan groaned, rubbing his temples. "Fine. You win. Stay. But if this is some elaborate prank, I'm going to." "Prank? I assure you, mortal, I take my duties most seriously." She turned back to the fireplace, frowning. "Your staff of power is shorter than I imagined, but still impressive for a mortal." Ethan choked on his breath, his face flushing. "Excuse me?" She gestured toward the poker leaning against the hearth. "This tool of fire taming. Surely it is imbued with great strength." "Oh. Right. That. Yeah, it's pretty standard." Lisha gave him a skeptical glance before turning her attention back to the fire. Ethan leaned against the wall, watching her with a mix of exasperation and fascination. This was either the most elaborate prank ever, or he'd officially lost his mind. Either way, it was shaping up to be the weirdest Christmas of his life. "Let me polish your baubles for luck," she announced suddenly, picking up a box of Christmas ornaments. Ethan stared at her, dumbfounded. You mean, the decorations? Indeed. They are sacred talismans, are they not? Sure. He decided it was better not to argue. Just, be careful with them. As Lisha meticulously polished each ornament, Ethan couldn't help but chuckle. You really take this stuff seriously, huh? Of course. The fate of your realm may depend on it. She glanced at him, her expression softening. You mortals may not understand the gravity of these matters, but you are fortunate to have a warrior such as I. Ethan shook his head, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, lucky me. Ethan stood in the kitchen, struggling to reconcile his unexpected houseguest with the reality he thought he knew. Lisha perched on a stool at the counter, watching intently as he prepared breakfast. Her fascination with the most mundane of human tasks was equal parts amusing and unnerving. You're saying pancakes are a warrior's meal? Ethan asked, flipping a round of batter onto the skillet. They appear adequate for battle preparation, Lisha replied, her gaze unwavering. Though they lack enhancement. Enhancement? Lisha rummaged through a pouch at her waist and produced a small vial of shimmering liquid. This elixir will imbue the meal with strength. Ethan squinted at the glowing liquid. That's glitter. It is the essence of frost bloom, or rare and potent herb, she corrected, unscrewing the cap. Before Ethan could protest, she poured a generous amount over the pancakes. The mixture hissed and sparked, sending a plume of sugary steam into the air. Great. Now my pancakes look radioactive, Ethan muttered, coughing. Lisha leaned closer, inspecting the transformation with satisfaction. You are welcome. He sighed, plating the glitter-infused pancakes and setting them in front of her. She attacked them with enthusiasm, her tiny fork stabbing each bite like it was an enemy in battle. Ethan sat opposite her, nibbling cautiously at his own glitter-free stack. You really believe this whole guardian thing, don't you? He asked between bites. It is not belief, it is truth, she replied, wiping syrup from her lips. You have been chosen, whether you acknowledge it or not. Chosen to do what, exactly? Babysit a fireplace? To protect the sacred hearth from forces that would exploit its power. She paused, narrowing her eyes at him. Do you not feel the weight of your responsibility? Ethan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Lady, the only thing I feel is a headache. Before Lisha could respond, her attention shifted to the corner of the room. Her expression hardened as she pointed toward the vacuum cleaner. What is that creature? Ethan followed her gaze and laughed. That's not a creature. It's a vacuum cleaner. Lisha stood, drawing her tiny sword. It appears hostile. It's not hostile. It's a machine. For cleaning. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. You wield such beasts in your daily life? Truly, mortals are more formidable than I anticipated. Ethan grabbed the vacuum and turned it on, the sudden roar making her jump. She raised her sword, ready to attack, but stopped when he pushed the vacuum across the floor, demonstrating its function. See? Harmless, he said, smirking. Lisha lowered her sword but remained wary. It devours filth with such ferocity. A fine companion for a guardian. Sure. Let's go with that. Her curiosity didn't end there. She inspected the rest of the room with a critical eye, marveling at Ethan's artifacts. The toaster was a flame box, his coffee maker a potion brewer, and the refrigerator a cold vault. Each discovery brought a fresh wave of questions and, inevitably, misunderstandings. Ethan returned to the table, hoping to finish his coffee in peace, but Lisha's attention shifted to his modest set of dumbbells by the window. She approached them with reverence, lifting one with both hands. These weights are tools of strength training, she asked. Yeah, for exercise, Ethan replied, taking a sip of coffee. You know, keeping in shape. She attempted to lift a heavier dumbbell and wobbled, nearly toppling over. A warrior's task, indeed, she grunted. Teach me your methods. It's not that complicated, he said, setting his mug down. You just pick them up and put them down. Over and over. Show me. He hesitated, then stood and demonstrated a basic bicep curl. Lisha mimicked him, her form exaggerated and overly dramatic. Your technique is sound, she said, panting after a few reps, but I sense untapped potential. Ethan stifled a laugh. Untapped potential, huh? You must teach me to handle this weighty rod with greater skill, she declared, holding the dumbbell aloft. Ethan nearly choked on his coffee. Yeah, I think we've done enough for today. The rest of the morning continued in much the same way, Lisha finding ways to interpret the mundane as extraordinary, while Ethan tried not to lose his mind. By the time noon rolled around, he was exhausted, though he had to admit her enthusiasm was infectious. Your world is strange, Lisha mused as she sat cross-legged on the couch, flipping through a magazine she'd found. Yet it has its charms. I'll take that as a compliment, Ethan said, collapsing into the armchair across from her. She looked up, her expression serious. Do not underestimate the power of your realm's customs. Even the smallest rituals hold meaning. Like what? Pancakes and dumbbells? Precisely. They are the foundation of your strength. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. You're something else, you know that? Lisha tilted her head, her silvery hair catching the light. I am Lisha of the Frostbound Court, guardian of the sacred hearth. And you, mortal, are fortunate to have my protection. Lucky me, Ethan muttered, though he couldn't help but smile. Ethan barely had time to process the surreal events of the morning before things took a more chaotic turn. The fireplace, which had been gently crackling moments ago, roared to life with an unnatural brilliance. Flames swirled in intricate patterns, and the air in the room grew heavy. Lisha was instantly on alert, her hand on her sword hilt. The hearth's magic is stirring, she said, her voice tense. Something is trying to breach the veil. Ethan blinked. Breaching veils? Lady, it's just a fireplace. Before he could finish, the fire spat out a glowing orb that hovered midair, expanding and twisting until it morphed into a mischievous, impish creature with glowing red eyes and a toothy grin. It cackled and darted around the room, scattering embers in its wake. What the hell is that? Ethan shouted, grabbing a nearby pillow as a makeshift shield. The Yule Fiend! Lisha exclaimed, her voice both determined and oddly triumphant. It seeks to disrupt the sacred hearth's balance. This is why I was sent. The fiend zipped across the room, knocking over a vase and setting a stray piece of tinsel ablaze. Ethan yelped, grabbing a glass of water and dousing the flames. Do something, he yelled at Lisha. She unsheathed her tiny sword and charged at the fiend, leaping onto the coffee table with surprising agility. Stand back, mortal. I shall vanquish this pest. Ethan watched as she lunged at the fiend, her movements swift but ultimately ineffective. Her sword swiped through the air, missing the target repeatedly as the creature zigzagged around the room, laughing mockingly. You're really selling this warrior thing, Ethan muttered, ducking as the fiend darted past his head. This foe is wily, Lisha admitted, gritting her teeth. Its power comes from chaos. We must outwit it. Ethan sighed, scanning the room for something, anything, that might help. His gaze landed on the string of Christmas lights he'd hastily hung the night before. An idea sparked. Chaos, huh, he muttered. Let's see how it likes this. He grabbed the string of lights and quickly plugged them in. The room was instantly bathed in a gaudy, multicolored glow. The fiend paused mid-flight, its attention drawn to the flashing bulbs. What are you doing? Lisha demanded, her sword poised. Improvising, Ethan replied, advancing cautiously. The fiend hovered near the lights, seemingly mesmerized. Taking his chance, Ethan swung the lights like a lasso, entangling the creature in the glowing cord. The fiend screeched, struggling against its colorful prison. Ethan yanked the lights tight, pulling the creature to the ground. Lisha wasted no time, pouncing and pinning the fiend with one foot. Now, we end this, she declared, raising her sword. Wait! Ethan shouted. Do you have to kill it? It's kind of festive. Lisha hesitated, glaring at the wriggling fiend. Its presence disrupts the hearth's harmony. We cannot allow it to remain. Fine, but maybe we can, I don't know, banish it instead? Less messy. Lisha considered this, then nodded. A wise suggestion. Stand back. Ethan stepped aside as she chanted in a language he didn't recognize. The fiend writhed and hissed, its form flickering like a dying flame. With a final burst of light, it vanished, leaving behind only a faint trace of glittering ash. Lisha sheathed her sword, her posture relaxing. The hearth is safe once more. Ethan let out a long breath, dropping the tangled lights onto the couch. Well, that was something. You performed admirably, Lisha said, her tone genuinely impressed. Your quick thinking and resourcefulness were instrumental. Yeah, well, you didn't exactly make it easy, Ethan muttered, brushing ash off his shirt. I thought you were supposed to be the expert here. I am a warrior, not a technician, she replied, crossing her arms. But together, we have proven formidable. He couldn't help but chuckle at her confidence. Formidable, huh? I'll take it. As he began tidying up the mess left behind, Lisha busied herself inspecting the hearth, muttering about fortifications and magical barriers. Despite the chaos, Ethan found himself oddly entertained by her dedication. You know, he said, leaning against the mantel, for all your talk about sacred duties and hearths, you're not half bad to have around. She glanced at him, her expression softening. And you, mortal, possess more courage than I initially perceived. Thanks. I think. They stood in companionable silence for a moment before the fireplace crackled softly, its warmth filling the room. Ethan couldn't help but feel a small sense of accomplishment, even if he wasn't entirely convinced about this whole guardian business. Now, we must remain vigilant, Lisha said, breaking the silence. The fiend's banishment may not be permanent. Ethan groaned. Great. Just what I needed, an eternal battle with Christmas monsters. Lisha smirked. Do not worry, mortal. With me at your side, no fiend shall prevail. Yeah, I'm starting to see that, Ethan replied, his tone equal parts sarcasm and genuine amusement. Guess I'm stuck with you. Indeed, she said, her smile faint but sincere. The hearth has chosen well. Ethan slumped into the armchair, his body still tense from the chaotic encounter with the Yule fiend. Lisha, seemingly unfazed, had already resumed her self-appointed role as the hearth's guardian, pacing near the fireplace with a determined look. You mortals truly lack discipline in your preparation, she said, glancing at him pointedly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Oh, I'm sorry. Next time I'll schedule the fiend attack for a more convenient time. She ignored his sarcasm, pulling out her tiny glowing sword again. We must be ready for anything. The hearth's magic has been disturbed, and such disturbances rarely go unnoticed. Yeah, about that, what exactly is so special about this hearth? Why does it need guarding? Lisha paused, her expression growing uncharacteristically serious. The sacred hearth is a nexus of magical energy, a conduit between realms. If its power were to fall into the wrong hands, the consequences would be dire. Ethan rubbed his temples. Great. So my grandpa left me a magic portal disguised as a fireplace. That's just fantastic. Your grandfather understood the responsibility, Lisha said, a hint of reproach in her tone. It is why he ensured the hearth would pass to you. Ethan let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, well, he didn't exactly leave an instruction manual. I didn't even know this place was magical until you showed up. You are learning, she said, her tone softening. And you have proven yourself capable. Your ingenuity during the battle with the fiend was commendable. Thanks, I guess, he muttered, not entirely sure how to feel about the compliment. But what happens now? Do I just keep living here, waiting for the next magical disaster? That is for you to decide, Lisha said, turning to face him fully. But know this, the hearth has chosen you, and its power is tied to your will. Whether you embrace this duty or not, the hearth will remain bound to you. Ethan sighed, leaning back in the chair. No pressure, huh? Lisha tilted her head, studying him with an almost curious expression. You seem reluctant. Do you not see the honor in this task? Honor's great and all, but I didn't exactly sign up for this, he said, gesturing vaguely toward the fireplace. I just wanted a quiet Christmas in the middle of nowhere, not, whatever this is. She considered his words, then nodded. I understand. Your life has been disrupted, and I am partly to blame. For that, I apologize. The sincerity in her tone caught him off guard. Ah, thanks. I guess I've been a little harsh, huh? You have faced the unknown with bravery, she said, her gaze unwavering. Few mortals would have fared as well. Ethan chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. You really know how to lay it on thick, don't you? It is not flattery, she said firmly. It is the truth. For a moment, the tension in the room eased, replaced by an odd sense of camaraderie. Ethan found himself smiling despite the absurdity of the situation. So, if I'm stuck with this whole guardian thing, he said, what happens to you? Are you sticking around too? Lisha straightened, her posture as regal as ever. It is my duty to remain until the hearth is secure. I shall not abandon my post. Lucky me, Ethan muttered, though there was no malice in his tone. Guess I'd better get used to having a roommate. She arched an eyebrow. You speak as though it is a burden. I didn't say that, he said quickly, holding up his hands. Just, not what I expected, you know? Life rarely unfolds as one expects, she said, a small smile playing at her lips. But it is how we adapt that defines us. Ethan stared at her for a moment, caught off guard by the weight of her words. You know, for a tiny elf warrior, you're pretty wise. I am centuries old, she said matter-of-factly. Wisdom comes with experience. Centuries, huh, he said, leaning forward with a teasing grin. You don't look a day over 20. She blinked, clearly unfamiliar with the compliment, then frowned. Is that meant to be flattering? Yeah, Ethan said, his grin widening. Take it as a compliment. She tilted her head, considering his words, then nodded. Very well. I shall take it as such. The crackling of the fire filled the silence that followed, the room bathed in a warm, golden glow. For the first time since Lisha's arrival, Ethan felt a sense of calm. It wasn't the peaceful solitude he'd initially sought, but it wasn't entirely unwelcome either. As he stood to retrieve a blanket from the couch, Lisha's voice stopped him. Ethan. He turned, surprised to hear her use his name. Yeah? Thank you, she said, her expression uncharacteristically earnest. For accepting this responsibility, even reluctantly. The hearth is fortunate to have you. He paused, her words sinking in, then offered a small smile. Don't mention it. As he draped the blanket over his shoulders and settled back into the armchair, he couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, this whole guardian thing wouldn't be so bad after all.